read a story and thought, that's how it ended? Sometimes we wish that stories could end differently. And fortunately for you, that is exactly what we'll be doing today. We will be looking back at two passages we read in shared reading to change their endings. Our focus for today is to continue with elaborated events and short sequence of events, and including details in our story. For my example, I will be using our text from Shared, Snow White Meets the Huntsman. Now, just as a little recap, I am going to read the summary of Snow White Meets the Huntsman just to refresh our memory so that I can then take that and create a different ending. So, the summary of Snow White Meets the Huntsman is a jealous queen despises her stepdaughter Snow White because she becomes more fair than her. It is because of this jealousy that the queen orders her huntsman to take her into the woods to kill her. However, the huntsman cannot harm the innocent girl and allows her to escape. He tricks the queen into thinking that he completed her command, and the queen is satisfied. All right, so before we look at how to change the ending, I want us to look at this slide very quickly just so that I can help us understand how we should organize our thinking before we just write anything, because it's a little hard to just kind of start and change an ending. So it's really nice if you organize your thinking first and then you can start writing. So what I have is, before I change the ending of the story, I need to think about the key events in the story that I can change. I will make a list of the key events to help me brainstorm. So what I've done is I've pinpointed certain events that I remembered from my story and jotted them down. Now, one thing I do want to mention, because we're changing the ending, I don't want to necessarily think of events that happened way at the beginning of the story, because then I'm just rewriting the story, and that's not what we want. We're just trying to change the ending. So I stuck to the key events that happened towards the end of our text. So I wrote down: the queen orders the huntsman to get rid of Snow White. The huntsman takes Snow White into the woods. Snow White escapes, and the queen is pleased with what the huntsman did. So the reason why I did that is because now I can pinpoint which of those key events do I want to start to help change my ending. So when I was brainstorming, I came up with an idea for when the queen orders the huntsman to get rid of Snow White. So I highlighted that, and that was my focus. That's where I wanted to start to help them change the ending. So in the next slide that I'm going to show you what I wrote and how I changed the ending. Again, there are going to be snippets of the text of what was already in the story. And honestly, there should be a little bit from the original story, because I'm not just adding, random characters and, completely different stories into this one, because we want to make sure that it still flows, that if I were to switch the author's ending with my ending, that it would still make sense in a way. So keep that in mind when you're writing your story. So yes, it might look a little long. I always love, stories and changing them up. So don't get intimidated. It, doesn't have to be this long, but just think about, what I was doing in my text to then just inspire you when you change your endings. So I wrote: the queen walked up to her mirror and asked, who is the fairest of them all? The mirror said, my queen, it is no longer you. Snow White has become the fairest of them all. The queen was mad. The queen needed to do something. She wanted her to disappear. That's it, yelled the queen. That night, the queen made a potion to make her invisible. The next day, the queen and Snow White took a walk outside. After becoming tired, they both sat and looked inside their basket. "Here you go, Snow White, a nice drink for you," the queen said as she handed Snow White a small bottle filled with a liquid. "Thank you," said Snow White as she drank the potion. All of a sudden, Snow White looked at her hands. They were invisible. She cried out, "What is going on?" The queen smiled and said, "You can no longer be the fairest of them all if you can't be seen." Snow White feared what the queen might do next, so she ran into the woods to escape. So again, I changed the part where instead of having the huntsman kind of get rid of Snow White, it was the queen that I changed that, created this potion to make her invisible. So think about again just a slight change in the story, but also notice the details that I wrote in there. I wanted to make sure that it still flowed, that it still made sense. I added dialogue within my story. So this is just a nice kind of change of the event, and again, Snow White was able to escape. So I still use that same ending in a way, because I couldn't necessarily think of how I wanted it to end, and that's okay if you use it again from the original text. Here is what you will do now on your own. You will be changing the ending of the story, Come Away, Come Away. On the next slide, you will be able to re-listen to the ending of the story to refresh your memory. There you will also see a list of events that can help guide you to change the ending of the story. If you want to take a different approach, that's okay as well. Remember, this is your rough draft. Be creative. You've got this. "But your mother gets letters." "Don't have a mother," he said. Not only had he no mother, but he had not the slightest desire to have one. He thought them very overrated persons. Wendy, however, felt at once that she was in the presence of a tragedy. "Oh, Peter, no wonder you were crying," she said, and got out of bed and ran to him. "I wasn't crying about mothers," he said rather indignantly. "I was crying because I can't get my shadow to stick on. Besides, I wasn't crying." "It has come off?" "Yes." Then Wendy saw the shadow on the floor, looking so draggled, and she was frightfully sorry for Peter. "How awful," she said, but she could not help smiling when she saw that he had been trying to stick it on with soap. How exactly like a boy. Fortunately, she knew at once what to do. "It must be sewn on," she said, just a little patronizingly. "What's sewn?" he asked. "You're dreadfully ignorant." "No, I'm not." But she was exulting in his ignorance. "I shall sew it on for you, my little man," she said, though he was tall as herself, and she got out her sewing bag and sewed the shadow onto Peter's foot. "I dare say it will hurt a little," she warned him. "Oh, I shan't cry," said Peter, who was already of the opinion that he had never cried in his life. He clenched his teeth and did not cry, and soon his shadow was behaving properly, though still a little creased. "Perhaps I should have ironed it," Wendy said thoughtfully, but Peter, boylike, was indifferent to appearances, and he was now jumping about in the wildest glee. Alas, he had already forgotten that he owed his bliss to Wendy. He thought he had attached the shadow himself. "How clever I am!" he cried rapturously. "Oh, the cleverness of me!" It is humiliating to have to confess that this conceit of Peter was one of his most fascinating qualities. To put it with brutal frankness, there was never a cockier boy. But for the moment, Wendy was shocked. "You braggart," she exclaimed with frightful sarcasm. "Of course I did nothing." "You did a little," Peter said carelessly, and continued to dance. "A little," she replied with pride. "If I am of no use, I can at least withdraw." "Wendy," he said, "don't withdraw. One girl is more use than 20 boys.